The British Airways Boeing was just starting a long turn over Labrador. Captain James Howard and his co-pilot Francis Lehman Boyd noticed a long metallic object in the clear sky. The two pilots couldn't tell how big it was. Boyd contacted the Goose Bay Control Tower to ask if any other aircraft were flying in the vicinity, and was told that there weren't any. Boyd was hardly surprised. In his opinion, this object and the smaller craft that was flying with it were not man-made. They had to be some of those flying saucers that the press had been talking about for a few years. He had always been skeptical of all those stories about Martians, but that night in 1954, all doubts were erased from his mind. Flying saucers really did exist.
OVNI.
Unidentified flying objects. Some people think they're visitors from outer space, while others think they're hallucinations or errors in interpreting what was seen. Who's right? People have been saying for ages that they saw strange things in the sky. An Egyptian scroll from the days of Pharaoh Thutmose III speaks of a ball of fire, 5 meters wide, that flew across the sky 35 centuries ago. In the Bible, a star guided the wise men to Christ's manger. In August 1566, a local newspaper in Basel, Switzerland, reported that black spheres were seen flying towards the sun at an amazing speed.
UFOs have been reported throughout history. Especially in Canada, where we've done most of our research, we've been able to look into historical records and found as long ago as 1663 or 1662, when Jesuit missionaries were speaking with some of the First Nations people in what is now Quebec, they reported many very interesting things. They were very good at recording scientific concepts, what was going on in the area at the time, the geology, the astronomy. And at that time, in one of their diaries, they reported that they had seen and witnessed fiery serpents, as they described, along with many of the people in the villages that they were staying in, that these fiery serpents moved through the sky in unexplained manners, balls of light that seemed to dance through the heavens, and they had no explanation for what they had seen.
As far as most scientists are concerned, these wild stories are exaggerated accounts of well-known astronomical activities such as comets, meteorites, and aurora borealis. Man's lack of knowledge in the past regarding these naturally occurring phenomena led to individuals imagining that they were seeing incredible crafts flying in the air. In 1897, strange airships that looked like zeppelins were seen flying over the United States. This was 6 years before the famous first flight of the Wright brothers. No explanation was ever found for these mysterious airships.
In 1915, over Parliament Hill, many flying lights, the sounds of airplanes moving in the sky were reported by many people in the surrounding area, in Brockville, Ottawa, throughout the entire valley. And because it was very close to the war at that time, they were concerned that perhaps we were going to be invaded. We were in danger of Canada itself being drawn into the war by some invading force. So this caused such concern among the government and among the population, and they contacted the police, that they actually killed the lights. They turned off the lights of Parliament Hill to black them out so that they would not be a target for any invaders.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, an American civil pilot, reported having seen 9 objects flying in formation like a flock of geese while he was over Mount Rainier in Washington State.
Kenneth Arnold was one of the first people to come forward with a statement that he had seen flying saucers. Now, he did not himself say they were saucers. In fact, he said that they were more crescent-shaped, but they moved like saucers skimming across the water. And journalists at the time connected this together and called them flying saucers. He was at the time on a mercy mission, looking for a lost aircraft that had itself gone down, and he was with a group or a number of individuals searching for this particular aircraft.
Over the next few days, strange objects flying in the air were reported throughout America. Then they began to appear in Europe as well. When asked, scientists came up with rational explanations. They had to be cases of hallucinations, mass hysteria, or simple atmospheric phenomena. In other words, they had no idea.
In June 1954, the crew and many passengers aboard British Airways Boeing 377 Stratocruiser saw a large group of unknown objects flying over Labrador, Canada. When they landed in Goose Bay to refuel, Captain James Howard and his co-pilot Francis Lehman Boyd were questioned by representatives of the Canadian and U.S. Air Forces. They were told that similar observations had also been reported by others in the area. When they arrived in London the next day, Howard and Boyd had to report to the British Ministry of Defence, which proved that even back then, UFOs were being taken seriously.
Today, 60 years after the modern era of UFOs first began, the phenomenon remains as puzzling as it was back then. As soon as they began to appear in 1947, flying saucers, as they were called in those days, aroused the curiosity of the public, then of scientists and the military. We're still not sure exactly what UFOs are. On the other hand, we do know what they aren't. Today, when we speak of UFOs, most people immediately associate the expression with alien spacecraft. But this wasn't always the case, and this association is being increasingly questioned.
Back in 1947, most people did not consider that the flying saucers that were being observed were alien spacecraft. Certainly it was popularized by some, but at the most part it was described as perhaps a Russian secret weapon. The Russians had developed something that was going to be tested over the United States, and they were worried about that, and that is why the government and military became involved. They were certain that they were perhaps an enemy vessel of some sort, an enemy device that was being tested.
It was the beginning of the Cold War. Flying saucers intrigued high-ranking military officials. There was speculation that they might be extraterrestrial vehicles, but that theory was kept secret. From the 1950s on, the alien theory gradually became the most popular way to explain these mysterious flying saucers.
Ufology as a science, or perhaps it is really an art, has gone through several cycles, and it is dependent very greatly on the personal bias of the individual doing the research. There are individuals who believe that aliens are responsible for the flying saucers, and some who absolutely refuse to consider that in any way. Others fall in between. Perhaps some are unusual natural phenomena, perhaps some are a spiritual phenomena, and there are others whose interests and speculations lie somewhere beyond that.
Although the psychosocial approach appeals to some intellectuals, it is not widely accepted. If most of the occurrences were nothing more than the product of someone's imagination, then how do you explain encounters of the second kind? Sightings where there was a visible impact on the environment. In Montreal on January 6, 1977, Mrs. Florida Malbeuf was sitting in her kitchen in the middle of the night. From where she was sitting, she could see something that looked like a large plate 5 meters wide, landing on the roof of a building across the street. She couldn't believe her eyes, but something was definitely happening. Suddenly, she saw 2 figures moving towards the edge of the roof. She was too far away to make out their features, but they appeared to be dressed in white one-piece jumpsuits.